Whispers in the trees, the Vancouver Island encounter. My name is Ethan. In 2014, my wife Dany and I took what would be our final camping trip to Vancouver Island, a place we had grown to love, and one we thought we knew well. We were both seasoned campers, drawn to the island's unique mix of coastal serenity and ancient, dense forest. But nothing in all our years of backpacking and backcountry experience prepared us for what happened on that final weekend. We set out early Friday morning, parking our car at a remote lot several miles from the nearest road access point. From there, it was a rigorous 2-kilometer hike through a winding forest trail, then another kilometer along the rocky beach to reach the cove we considered our spot. It was secluded, quiet, framed by cliffs and thick evergreens, exactly what we were looking for. The weather was perfect, warm with a salty breeze rolling off the Pacific and a clear sky that promised a beautiful night under the stars. We pitched our tent in the tree line just a few yards above the beach and built a small fire ring from smooth stones. A few hours before sunset, while gathering driftwood, we ran into another camper named Leon. He was from New Zealand, in his late 20s, traveling across North America in a beat-up white van. He had parked back on the access road and said he was just hiking down to check out the coast. He was friendly, a little eccentric maybe, but not in a threatening way. When we mentioned we were camping overnight on the beach, we invited him to come back for a drink later. Around dusk, he returned with a bottle of red wine, and we sat around the fire, swapping travel stories and laughing at how loud the gulls were that evening. That's when we first heard the voices. They came from behind us, from the tree line, deep within the woods. Faint, high-pitched, distinctly female. At first, we all thought it was just sound carrying strangely, maybe other hikers or campers nearby. But the way the voices floated in and out, without any distinct words, made us pause. Leon even stood up and scanned the trees. "Weird echo, huh?" he said, brushing it off with a smile. "Or maybe sirens come ashore here." He laughed. We didn't. The sky turned navy blue as twilight set in. Leon said his goodbyes, thanking us for the company, and began the hike back to his van before darkness made the trail too dangerous. Dany and I stayed by the fire, though the easygoing vibe from earlier had soured. The voices hadn't stopped. If anything, they seemed closer now. Still unintelligible, just murmurs, but now more rapid, almost overlapping each other, as if two women were speaking nonsense over one another. "What do you think it is?" Dany asked me quietly, leaning closer. "Coyotes, birds." "I don't know," I replied, trying to stay calm. "Maybe campers offshore, and the sounds bouncing weird." But we had checked the cove earlier. There were no boats, no lights on the water, no distant fires, just the pitch-black ocean. Dany looked visibly unsettled. She kept glancing over her shoulder, the shadows between the trees now too dark to see into. We decided to stay up late, keeping the fire going as long as possible. We didn't talk much, just listened. By 2:30 a.m., the voices had finally stopped. We did a last sweep with our flashlights, scanning the woods and the water. Nothing. We put out the fire, climbed into the tent, and zipped it tight. Around 3 a.m., we finally laid down. We were just beginning to drift off when we heard it. Footsteps. Soft at first, crunching through the dry seagrass and twigs near where the fire had been. I held my breath. Dany grabbed my hand. The steps were slow, careful, deliberate. They had come from the direction of the inland bush, the side we knew was practically impassable without bushwhacking. We'd scoped the terrain earlier in daylight. It was steep, with jagged rock formations and heavy undergrowth. No trail, no way in. At least not for humans. The footsteps circled the fire pit, then came closer, directly up to our tent. For several seconds we heard nothing but heavy, slow breathing. Then came the voices again. Two of them, female, loud, gibberish, not a language, not even words, just vocalizations. Sounds layered and chaotic, as if they weren't speaking to each other but rather competing with one another. Both voices were raspy and rapid, almost mechanical. We lay frozen, listening as they circled our tent. The worst part, no flashlights, no rustling, no stumbling. Whoever or whatever they were navigating the pitch-black forest in total silence, without any light. It was impossible, terrifyingly unnatural. The voices grew louder, directly above us. Then, all at once, they stopped. Silence. Complete, suffocating silence. No waves, no wind, no birds. Just our own breath inside the tent. They were gone. Neither of us slept that night. We lay awake, every muscle tense, every sound amplified by fear. When the sky finally began to lighten, I unzipped the tent and scanned the area with a knife in one hand. Nothing. No tracks, no footprints, no sign of intrusion. The fire ring was still cold. The forest was still, as if nothing had happened. We packed up immediately. We didn't speak much. The walk back through the woods felt 100 times longer than before. Every snapped twig behind us felt like a presence, every gust of wind a whisper. When we made it back to the road, Leon's van was gone. That was our last time on Vancouver Island. We never returned. Sometimes late at night, Dany brings it up. "What do you think they were?" she'll ask. I don't have an answer. I don't think I want one. All I know is that there was something in those woods that night, something that watched us, walked with impossible silence, and spoke in tongues not meant for human ears. And whatever it was, it knew we were there. Below the earth, the bunker in the woods of northern Germany. In the early summer of 2019, two childhood friends, Lucas and Felix, set off on a hike in the remote woodlands of northern Germany, near the former border of the German Democratic Republic. They were both in their late 20s, born and raised in Berlin, but they had always shared a fascination with forgotten places, abandoned hospitals, ruined castles, Cold War relics. It was more than a hobby. It was their ritual. That day, they had driven 3 hours out of the city, into a region where cell reception faded and the forest seemed thicker, older, and less touched by time. They parked along an unmarked logging trail and hiked for about an hour before spotting something strange just off the main path. Metallic tubes protruding vertically from the earth like crooked periscopes. At first, they thought the pipes might be some kind of old irrigation system, or maybe ventilation shafts from a collapsed cellar. But the layout didn't make sense. The forest floor around them was undisturbed. No signs of construction, no ruins in sight. The pipes were rusty, but intact. Lucas, the more adventurous of the two, bent down and listened. He said he could hear faint echoes. Air movement. Their curiosity piqued. They began to search the surrounding area more thoroughly. It didn't take long before Felix, brushing aside dense bushes and overgrowth, uncovered what looked like a large wooden trapdoor buried beneath leaves and moss. "Probably a cellar," Felix muttered, brushing off dirt. Lucas was already trying to open it. It creaked open with surprising ease. Beneath it was a narrow concrete stairwell descending into the dark. Lucas turned to Felix, grinning, and said what would later haunt them both. Want to see what the Cold War left behind? They descended slowly, their flashlights flickering as they adjusted to the darkness. The air immediately changed, thicker, cooler, damp with the scent of mildew and iron. The stairs led to a massive underground hallway, lined with rusted pipes and steel doors. The walls were painted military green, but the paint had long since peeled into ragged strips. The floor sloped downward, suggesting the bunker went deeper still. They explored carefully, marking turns with chalk. The layout was a grid, hallways branching like veins from a long central corridor. Most of the rooms were empty, old storage areas, shattered desks, overturned lockers, and the occasional rat carcass. But as they ventured deeper, the decay became more severe. Ceiling tiles had collapsed, water pooled in corners. Mold bloomed in grotesque black patches. Then came the graffiti. At first it was typical: tags, pentagrams, smiley faces with X's for eyes. But the farther they went, the weirder it became. One phrase in particular was scrawled over and over again, in different sizes, different handwriting. Helft mir. Help me. They exchanged a nervous glance. It was unsettling, but graffiti in abandoned places wasn't unusual. They pressed on. At some point, the hallway forked sharply, and they chose the right-hand path. What they found there was different from the other rooms. This one was large, more like a chamber than a room, with thick, sealed doors that had been forced open. Inside was an old machine in the center of the floor. It looked like a mix between a generator and a medical scanner, with wires hanging like veins from its core. "What the hell is this?" Felix whispered. Lucas approached it, running his fingers along the corroded surface. Some kind of prototype, maybe. Medical. Electrical. There were papers nearby, soaked and unreadable, and an old clipboard still hanging on the wall. The labels were all in German, many marked with the word Versuchsobjekt, test subject. That's when they found the shoe. A single small shoe, sunken into a patch of black sludge on the far side of the room. It was white, with faded pink laces, a child's shoe. They both went quiet. Why would a child's shoe be in a place like this? Lucas wanted to leave. Felix agreed. But as they turned back toward the main corridor, Felix paused. "I saw something," he said, raising his flashlight toward the far wall. There, just barely visible beneath layers of grime and mold, was more writing, scratched directly into the concrete. "Hallo, Satan. Ich liebe dich." "Hello, Satan. I love you." Felix stepped back, flashlight trembling in his hand. "Let's go," Lucas said firmly, the tension in his voice now undeniable. They retraced their steps quickly, heart rates rising. The once thrilling exploration had curdled into dread. The silence of the bunker began to press in on them, and every creak of old pipes or drip of water sounded like approaching footsteps. Then they heard it. Metal on concrete, dragging. It came from somewhere behind them. Not running, not walking, dragging, like someone pulling something heavy across the floor. Neither of them spoke. They just ran. Their breath echoed down the corridors, joined now by distant tapping, repetitive and deliberate. Lucas dropped his flashlight at one point, and the darkness swallowed them for a few seconds. When he picked it back up, the beam flickered, as if the batteries were draining faster than normal. Back in the main hallway, they tried to follow their chalk markings, but some of them were gone. Wiped clean, or maybe never there at all. Panic set in. Then they saw it, movement at the far end of the corridor. A shadow, tall and hunched, standing completely still. No sound, no breathing, just the outline of something watching. They didn't wait. They turned down the first side path and found the stairwell after what felt like an eternity. As they ascended, Lucas swore he heard whispering, low and guttural, echoing up behind them. Neither of them looked back. Bursting into daylight was like waking from a nightmare. The forest was still there. The birds were chirping. The world had returned. They sealed the hatch behind them, not with a lock, just with rocks. It felt wrong to touch it again. Back in Berlin, they tried to research the bunker. It wasn't listed on any public records. A few obscure internet forums mentioned unmarked Nazi test facilities in the area, but nothing specific. Some claimed that during the final days of the war, rogue units conducted occult experiments underground, interfacing pseudoscience with rituals, trying anything to gain an edge. Lucas and Felix never went back. They don't hike anymore. Sometimes, when Lucas dreams, he hears dragging metal in the distance. And always, just before he wakes up, he sees the same words scratched across the wall. Ich liebe dich. And something standing in the dark, watching him.